Good morning. I'm Kim McClary, President and CEO of the Los Angeles World Affairs Council and Town Hall. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome you to a very special live stream program presented thanks to the generosity of the Korea Foundation's Los Angeles office. The Korea Foundation's mission is to enhance goodwill and friendship throughout the international community through public forums that promote information exchange and understanding. Before we begin our program with Lieutenant Governor and Ambassador Eleni Kounalakis, I want to extend a very warm Southern California welcome to Consul General Youngwon Kim of the Korean Consulate General Office in Los Angeles. Consul General Kim recently arrived in Los Angeles to begin his diplomatic service in our city. He joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1993 and has held many distinguished positions in the ministry, including service in Washington, D.C., Iraq, and the People's Republic of China. Welcome, Consul General Kim. I know you want to say a few words of welcome to our audience.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kim. Good morning. I would like to extend my virtual greeting to all of you participating in this meaningful event. As Kim introduced, I'm newly arrived, and this is my 10th day in LA. As a 10-day Los Angelino, I'm greatly honored to give a few words for this prestigious speakers forum, Los Angeles World Affairs Council and Town Hall. Taking this opportunity, I thank the Korea Foundation for its unwavering efforts to promote understandings on the Korean Peninsula, East Asia, and beyond in the Southern California area. I would like to express my deep gratitude to today's speaker, Eleni Kounalakis, Lieutenant Governor of California, for sharing her ideas and thoughts with us in the meaningful event. I think we made an excellent choice for having her present today's topic, as her professional career shows us, not only as a former diplomat, but also as California's representative for international affairs and trade. As you are well aware, East Asia and California is a natural neighbor, only divided by the Blue Ocean, the Pacific Ocean. California is the second largest exporting state to Asia. In 2021, California exported $76.48 billion in goods to Asia. From the Korea's perspective, Korea is the fifth largest trading partner for California, only followed by Mexico, Canada, China, and Japan. And Los Angeles is a gateway of transport and logistics to the United States for most of Korean companies and entrepreneurs. It takes care of 40% of US-Korean bilateral trade volumes. In this sense, I think today's topic is quite timely and appropriate, as we can take stock of bilateral trade relations between East Asia and California, and make us think of what promotes and delays these important trade flows. Through today's intellectual interactions, I hope we can find many issues to further develop, such as supply chain challenges caused by COVID-19 pandemic, geopolitical rivalry between major powers, and under these circumstances, the Biden administration's Indo-Pacific Economic Framework Initiative to promote resilient and secure supply chains. Through today's lecture and interactions, I hope we can verify once again the importance of our bilateral relations. With her rich experience and expertise, Ambassador Kounalakis will bring us to unknown territory of our bilateral trade relations. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Consul General Kim, thank you so much for your remarks. We're so grateful to you and your staff for the long-standing relationship we have had in presenting important discussions to our members in our virtual community. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's now my pleasure to introduce today's live stream, a conversation with California Lieutenant Governor Eleni Kounalakis. She is a native Californian. She's the first woman elected a lieutenant governor of our state. In addition to her duties as a lieutenant governor, she is California's representative for international affairs and trade. From 2010 to 2013, she served as ambassador to the Republic of Hungary under President Barack Obama. She was the first Greek American woman, one of America's youngest, to serve as U.S. ambassador. As Women's History Month concludes, we are so honored that Lieutenant Governor and Ambassador Eleni Kounalakis joins us today to talk about the California economy and international trade. We are also privileged for Jaime Lee to moderate the conversation with the Lieutenant Governor. Jaime joins us today as the president of the Los Angeles Board of Harbor Commissioners, a position she has held since 2018. Jaime is civically engaged and has served on various California and Los Angeles commissions. Hey, Jaime. She also is active. She's a very active community volunteer, and we sincerely appreciate her service as a board member of the Los Angeles World Affairs Council and Town Hall. A quick program update for our audience. The moderated conversation will last about 30 minutes. Then we will open the session up to audience questions. And you can see in the chat box on the side where you can add your questions. And our communications manager and programs digital producer, Claire Krelitz, will be managing the Q&A during the Q&A session. Thanks so much, Jaime. Let me turn this over to you. I know they have so much interest in questions for the Lieutenant Governor and yourself. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kim. Welcome, everyone. Lieutenant Governor Kounalakis, it's such a privilege to be here with you today. Thank you so much for joining us. I also want to welcome our live stream viewers, many Californians, as well as Americans across the nation, as well as our global friends and business partners. It's pretty amazing to recognize that we have been in this pandemic for over 2 years now, since California began its lockdowns in response to the coronavirus. And thanks to millions of vaccinations, California's economy is open, and we are still the 5th largest economy in the world. We handle nearly $552 billion in exports and imports each year, and our economy relies on the skills and talents of 40 million residents, 11 million of whom are immigrants. California is a leader in the United States for two-way trade, agricultural exports, and foreign direct investment. And before we dive into questions about FDI and international trade, our viewers would appreciate your perspectives on California's economic outlook and what you're currently seeing throughout the Golden State.
Well, Jaime, thank you very much for that question. First, let me just say it's a great honor to be here with all of you. Mr. Consul General, welcome to California. I look forward to meeting you, hopefully in person sometime soon. And of course, I also want to thank Kim so much for inviting me here. So, Jaime, you noted that we are just about 2 years since the extraordinary lockdown of the state of California and the pandemic that changed everything. And when I look at this period of time from the perspective of the California economy, it's really worth noting that just about 2 years ago, we were looking at the loss of 2.5 million jobs. And I got a phone call from the governor's office saying that they were projecting a May revise that would account for what would likely be a $54 billion budget deficit. What has happened in the last 2 years, I think, is going to be studied for many years to come, because in fact, instead of an economic collapse, we have had 2 years of historic budget surpluses, $75 billion budget surplus last year, and this year it's projected at being about $45 billion. So this is it's been quite a roller coaster when we look at what we anticipated would happen with the shutdown, the willful shutting down of our economy, and what in fact did happen. And so as we have been able to use these surpluses as certainly the most powerful tool that we have had for our recovery, these budget surpluses, there has been a couple of things that have been prioritized by the governor and by the state legislature in order to be able to counter the impacts of the global pandemic, the impacts to our economy, not just the health impacts, but also to invest in the future. And I think of them in sort of three major buckets of these budget priorities for programming the surplus. It doesn't get talked about enough, but budget resiliency and long-term strength and planning for the economic future of the state was probably one of the largest areas of contribution. The governor and the legislature reinvested in our rainy day fund. So California now has the largest rainy day fund that we have ever had. It's about $35 billion. We also have had historic pay downs of our pension obligations. More than $20 billion of these 2 years of surplus have gone to pay down these unfunded liabilities of pension obligations. You know, prior to the pandemic, people would talk about this all the time, saying, what is the future of California's economy with these large pension obligations? Well, we should recognize that first and foremost, bolstering the rainy day fund and paying down pension obligations will most certainly give us the kind of long-term budget stabilization that will benefit us over time. The second area of major investment as a result of these surpluses has been to deal with massive inequities in our state and the fact that we have large numbers of people living in our state who live at or below the poverty line. Certainly the COVID crisis and unemployment numbers reaching 16% at the peak have called for us to have a massive response to make sure that we could help California families keep their head above water, whether that was rent stabilization or the Golden State stimulus. Those were big budget items that helped to ensure that California families would be able to survive economically through the crisis. And then the third area, and this is, you know, something I think that we perhaps today, but all of us should be looking at, is the investment in all of the things that have made California the fifth largest economy in the future that will help us continue to be the place, as the governor says, where the future happens first. So what do I mean by that? First and foremost, education. The largest spending on K-12 education in our history, the addition of an entire new year of school. 4-year-olds within the next few years are going to be in school just like their 5-year-old counterparts. This addition of the transitional kindergarten year is really important, really exciting. And then, of course, higher education. I spend a lot of time in and around public higher education, historic investments in our system of higher education to make sure that we are training the workforce of the future. So education is key in planning for the future. And then another area, and again, I think it's something we can talk about more in depth today, is California's leadership in a carbon-free future. Already, more than half of California's energy that powers our electric grid comes from renewable resources. This is extraordinary. The US on average is just about 20%, and we're over half. And that doesn't include nuclear. So, we have a really important voice on the world stage in and around the transition to a carbon-free future for the world. And it starts with innovation that will allow us to scale up the technology that we already have in a way that not just for our state to meet our 2045 goals, but to be able to share that innovation with the world is very much at the top of the list of priorities here in California.
Thank you so much. And with that discussion, you've touched on so many incredible points that will lead into our FDI discussion. which many of our viewers are here to learn more about: education, resiliency, infrastructure investment, sustainability, and especially equity. All of these areas can further be bolstered by foreign direct investment in our state. California is currently the largest recipient of foreign direct investment, attracting $119 billion through those efforts. And since the US is the largest recipient of FDI worldwide, that puts California at the top of the list in the world. We're also a huge consumer market with 39 million consumers buying goods and services every single day. California is home to the world's leading trade and logistics infrastructures with sea and inland ports, rail systems, the most active international cargo airport in LAX. Can you share the key characteristics of a successful ecosystem for attracting foreign direct investment and bringing more of it here to California?
Well, Jaime, let me just start by recognizing your expertise in this area, and I'm sure that you could answer these questions probably for everyone as well or better than I can. But you're absolutely right. If the US is the largest recipient of foreign direct investment in the world and California is the largest recipient in the United States, that puts us right at the top. And I want to talk about the ecosystem, but you know, I also, for your viewers, want to recognize that you cannot underestimate California as a beacon for the world as a result of our open society. We are 27% immigrant in California, and the national average is about 14%. Just yesterday, the governor of Florida signed a bill that so-called "Don't Say Gay" bill that sends a message to people that you cannot be your authentic self. That they're going to crack down on the realities of people living their lives with their own identity. California is so far advanced from that kind of governance, and here people know that if you want to bring your talents anywhere in the world and be able to live your authentic self, but advance your own dreams and ambitions, we are a beacon. And I just am compelled to mention that to all of you, because we think of the business elements, and I'll talk about those, but you cannot underestimate what our brand means in the world in terms of attracting the best and the brightest to come here, not just internationally, but of course from around the country as well. So as you noted, we are first in the country. We have about 700,000 jobs in our state attributable to foreign direct investment. About 1 in 5 of all California jobs are attributed to trade, tourism, and FDI. Very important part of our economy. And let me just say that our GoBiz, the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, has a whole page devoted to great success stories of FDI. And so I encourage people, if you're looking for inspiration and examples, to visit the GoBiz website. Southern California, since many of you are down there right now, has, you know, if you go the top, you start to zero in on Southern California with over 440,000 jobs attributable to FDI, with 11,000 firms that pay out about $39 million every year in wages. And so the elements of an ecosystem, though, as you ask, first of all, the culture, but then our system of public higher education is a very important part of this. When I was U.S. ambassador in Hungary, people would ask me all the time, what is responsible for the creation of Silicon Valley? It's the universities in and around the area, between Stanford University, Berkeley, UCSF, the private universities, state universities, San Jose State and San Francisco State, so many other public higher education in the institutions of higher education in the area, plus a lot of venture capital. So someone was saying to me recently, they were noting in the biotech industry that Boston is now becoming a hub for biotech. Well, the reality is it was probably inevitable that at least one other place in the world would be a place where you could bring your biotech company for venture capital, because for a while, Northern California was the only place where new companies could go in order to be able to benefit from significant investments of venture capital. But we are still #1 for VC. In fact, the amount of VC that is distributed in California is 2 times the next 3 states combined. So when people say, well, people are, everybody's leaving California, a certain amount of sort of equalization elsewhere in the country was expected, and maybe to some degree accelerated by COVID. But we are still very much on top of this game, and that makes a difference for the overall ecosystem.
That's great. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I am the co-chair of a newly formed public-private partnership to promote FDI investment here in Los Angeles. It's called Global LA. And we'd be curious to know, what are some resources and services that California as the state is specifically offering to investors, especially the types of companies that we're trying to attract?
So the list is too long for me to be able to enumerate, but let me go back again to these historic budget surpluses, because these kinds of programs are a top priority. And if you go to the GoBiz website, they are fast at work 24 hours a day, standing up these various programs, and you will find a lot of assistance to be able to benefit from these state programs by going to the GoBiz website. The other area, though, that I really think it's probably notable to talk a little bit more about right at the top is the opportunities that exist in California right now around the carbon-free future. The governor and the legislature have put about $37.5 billion of this surplus into investments that will fuel the carbon-free future. So as I travel virtually throughout the world in all of the Zooms that we've been doing with potential investors into California, I really encourage them to look at opportunities in and around clean tech and clean energy. $10 billion alone is going into the ZEV infrastructure and programs to accelerate adoption of zero-emission vehicles. But there are, just tremendous opportunities in this space. Elon Musk is not a very appreciative person, I have come to learn, because Tesla could not have been born anywhere else in the world. Tesla received billions of dollars in rebates for people who bought Teslas, and in tax credits for the early R&D investments that they made. And we are the largest consumer market in the United States as well. So our targets around adoption also really fueled that company to be able to succeed. So it's important to note that we didn't even have a number like this, $37.5 billion for climate resiliency. And the reality is that it is the private sector that takes advantage of these kinds of programs. And so it's, again, Jaime, as you note, it's the investment into the ecosystem. And a big part of that ecosystem is the recognition of the opportunity by the private sector.
Right. One of the big gains that we got for Global LA here in the LA region was a Vietnamese electric car company called VinFast, which set up offices here in the region recently. Can you cite any other examples of success stories from countries or companies who have come to California?
Oh my goodness, there are just so many. And again, the list that's being accumulated over at GoBiz is a great resource, but it's happening fast and furiously. There are new consuls general that are being established. Sweden just established a consul general in California, the only one in the United States outside of Washington, D.C., specifically around finding ways for Swedish business people to be able to bring their knowledge and expertise here in order to be able to take advantage again of these programs that are being driven by our budget surplus, as well as the large marketplace that we have here in the state.
It sounds like Dee Dee is going to be a great resource for us at GoBiz. We were pleased to have her on our port monthly press conference this month, talking about supply chain resiliency and what's going on at the ports and how the state and federal government have been able to support us. So we'll be studying the GoBiz website for sure. Another area that we were looking at too is attracting international students to come here, because as you talked about, a free and open society, a diversified and rich, culturally in every different way, diverse landscape here in California is what makes it so very attractive to companies to invest in. And I was wondering what kind of role the public universities in California can play into that role, especially since they're really structured to serve the local constituency.
Well, we love international students here in California. We are typically the top location for international students for some of the reasons I just explained, but also because our system of public higher education in California is really quite extraordinary. We have about 2.5 million students enrolled just in public higher education in our state. Our doors are wide open for international students to come here, and we encourage it at every opportunity. The last administration made changes to student visas that made it harder for students to come, and we're very hopeful that a lot of that is being restored right now by the Biden administration. But it really is the facilities themselves. 10 universities of California, 23 campuses of the CSU, and 116 community colleges here in our state. So I might note as well, just for your general knowledge, that of those 2.5 million students enrolled in California, about 38% are the first in their family to go to college. It's this giant conveyor belt of talent, and there is no doubt that that helps to support the innovation economy and the ecosystem that is so friendly for trade and investment and foreign direct investment.
That's so inspirational. And one final point on that too is all of these investments that are coming in have an opportunity to balance the equity that we see within our society, trying to help a lot of these companies, whether they're setting up something in manufacturing or looking for a large talent pool, to locate in underserved communities within our area. So that's been another focus as well for the FDI programs here in Southern California. The Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act was passed late last year, and could you please help us understand how this investment of federal funds plays a role in boosting two-way trade, along with enhancing California as an even more desirable FDI state?
Well, absolutely. The supply chain challenges that we have had have been largely driven by the extraordinary increase in the amount of activity at our ports. At one point, we had a backlog of as many as 120 ships anchored off of the coast. It's now down to about 50, but this has put tremendous pressure on our entire system of goods movement in Southern California, as you know very, very well from your work. But about 40% of all the containerized shipping coming into the United States comes through the port of LA and Long Beach. The necessary logistics and infrastructure and warehousing and manufacturing that goes along with that, not just for regular manufacturing, but also for our agricultural products, is absolutely tremendous. And we must invest more in our infrastructure in order to be able to support it and support all the jobs that go along with it. So we're thrilled about the Biden administration passing the infrastructure bill. Secretary Pete Buttigieg was out at the Port of Long Beach in LA not too long ago to talk about what this will mean for us, but it will bring about $30 billion over the next 5 years into the state of California. That will go to federal highways, will be the majority recipient with about $25 billion. About $4 billion will go to the new bridge program. And there are also programs for the resiliency of transportation infrastructure and to support the expansion of EV charging stations. But again, this goes along with the historic surplus that we have at the state of California and our own state infrastructure plans for investment, with about $2.3 billion out of our surplus that will go toward port infrastructure and the greening of our ports. And we all know it's very, very important. We have large populations living in and around our ports. We have to do more for port electrification and to ensure that emissions are reduced so that those living in and around all of this extraordinary activity are safe from increase in pollution as a result of that activity.
Yes, definitely. We'll be putting our Clean Truck Fund rate into service this Friday. We're excited to launch that and even more grateful for the partnership of the state of California and the funds coming from the federal government, because we certainly need a partner to help the Port of LA drive towards a zero emissions future. It's essentially a $10 billion problem, but the infrastructure piece will be incredibly important. The charging stations, hydrogen fueling stations, and for the industry to meet us to bring the R&D forward so that these vehicles can become commercialized. So we're really, really looking forward to that, as well as FLOW, which is part of the federal, I think it's from the Department of Transportation. I can't remember what FLOW stands for, but that cyber resiliency and the technology piece to come in to help these goods move faster through the supply chain, which reduces the time that ships are idling or waiting, or that the trucks and cranes are working. So all of that is incredibly exciting. We just have a couple more minutes left. So our last segment is talking about your role as California's representative for international affairs and trade. I wanted to know that LA is home to the world's third largest consular corps community with 99 countries represented. And economic development and trade opportunities are foundational to a diplomat's work. So first, can you share what types of outreach you conducted virtually throughout the pandemic? And secondly, where are you looking to travel in 2022?
Well, I'm very honored that the governor asked me to serve in this capacity as his representative for international affairs and trade. Right after we were both sworn in, began this work together. I went to China for the Belt and Road Conference in 2019 in that capacity only to talk about climate change and the importance of advocating for countries around the world to take investment, their foreign direct investment in the world, to put climate change at the top of their priorities. That was followed up by a great week-long delegation to Mexico City in 2020 with a great group of business leaders from California to Mexico City. Mexico is naturally our #1 most important international partner with one of the most active land borders in the world between California and Mexico, and of course all of our person-to-person relationships that we have. Again, followed by a trip just before the pandemic kicked in to India, where I went largely to promote the sale of our tree nuts, as well as the increased opportunity for tourism from India into California. All of that changed in March 2 years ago when we basically went online with these trade missions. You know, we hosted a virtual royal visit by the Norwegian Crown Prince, Haakon, which was incredibly fun and felt like we were all in a room together. But again, was largely based on the importance of trade with Norway and their investment, we hope, in our offshore wind programs. We have a robust engagement with Japan and certainly around partnership in the hydrogen area. We were hoping to be in Japan right now in the middle of March. Unfortunately, with the Omicron variant, that has had to be postponed. So we are still, unfortunately, finding it difficult to be able to now quickly ramp up the ability to physically do these large trade missions. But I am very hopeful that 2023 is going to be full of those opportunities to do that work and to do it together. You mentioned Director Dee Dee Myers. It has been phenomenal to have her leading GoBiz. She has an extraordinary wealth of experience. She also brings with her her own star power. You might know she was the inspiration for the West Wing, one of the characters in the West Wing, who was arguably the smartest and most effective person on the show. And true to form, she is doing an incredible job leading GoBiz. She and I together, we're going to be leading the Japan mission. So I look forward to being able to partner with her. I will just note that the priorities of the United States are certainly the priorities of California. And so trade in the Pacific, Mexico, Canada, the European Union, those are all important for us here as well.
Thank you so much. At this time, we want to reserve enough time for questions. So I'd like to invite Claire from the Los Angeles World Affairs Council and Town Hall to come join us and share some audience questions.
Yes, well, thank you so much to both of you for that engaging conversation. We have lots of audience questions, so I'm going to try to get through as many as we can. The first person asks, is the budget surplus due to federal government grants, more taxes collected, or better budgeting? What about collecting taxes from the many billionaires who live in California?
Well, it is fairly well known that the top 1% of California taxpayers fund about 45% of the budget. So this is all taxpayer dollars that have come in over the last 2 years, personal income tax contributions, as well as corporate contributions. We know the stock market has been going wild during the pandemic, so the gains that companies have made and the realized gains of taxpayers have largely contributed to that surplus. So there have been, on top of those surpluses, the federal stimulus. So I mentioned the $75 billion budget surplus last year. On top of that, we got $26 billion of federal funds. So thank you for the question, because you point out that when you add in the federal stimulus, these are just unheard of dollars, and that is why I think it's so important to focus on what the state is doing with all of this discretionary money. And may I just on that point remark that another high priority has been the housing and homelessness issue, which again, it's not so much in and around trade, but is something that you all should know, that this is considered to be a significant challenge of our state. The cost of living going up definitely impacts the ability of companies to come here. Home prices went up significantly, over 30% during the pandemic, and the housing problem is just one that troubles all of us here in our state, and significant funds have gone into those two areas as well.
Thank you. So we have a handful of questions now about California's drought and water resources. So one person asked, can you speak to water resource infrastructure investment, and if that includes desalination or other long-term solutions to drought and climate change? And then sort of as a follow-up, Governor Newsom has ordered Californians to lower their water usage due to the drought, but compliance is a huge issue. So what more can be done? And I can repeat any of those questions if that was.
No, I'm so glad that there is a high level of interest in the question of water in our state, exacerbated now by the drought that we find ourselves in again. You know, a big part of the reason why California is leading on combating climate change, frankly, is because we are coping with the very real impacts of a changing climate. The wildfires in 2020 were the most catastrophic in our state's history. 4 of the 5 worst, most catastrophic fires in our history happened just in that 1 year alone. If you can remember, on top of the pandemic, the dry lightning strikes in these massive fire complexes. And then, of course, the drought. I was down in Fresno for a few days at the beginning of the month, meeting with the citrus growers and other members of our farming community. They are doing everything they can to make every drop of water go as far as possible. It is what drives ag tech in our state. We are way ahead of the rest of the world in using the latest and greatest in farming technology and drip irrigation in order to be able to do as much as we can with the resources we have. But it is very real. And of course, the impacts to our people. I have been in homes in the Central Valley where mothers pour water into mugs from into cups from their kitchen sink and their bathtubs and ask me, how do I bathe my child in this water? So there is a great deal of focus by the administration on this area, but it is a challenge. We do not have enough water, and that is widely recognized. There is no question that limiting our water usage is the fastest, surest way to make every drop go farther. People may feel like it doesn't make a difference if you turn that shower off early or close the tap when you brush your teeth or stop watering your lawn. Makes a very big difference. In terms of investing in the future, this is why the governor is moving forward with the tunnel, the single tunnel through the Delta. It is why we're moving forward with studying the site's water reservoir, why we're looking at more upstream storage, and why, as was noted, we need to take a serious look at desal. The challenge with desal, it is very, very energy hungry in order to produce that water. But there are all kinds of companies that are looking at how to use renewable energy, whether it's hydrogen or offshore wind or solar, in order to power that kind of ability to do more desal in the future. It's going to be an all of the above approach, and we are in dire need of finding those solutions and implementing them.
Thank you. So this next person is wondering how the US-China trade war might impact California. And then after your response, Lieutenant Governor, I would open this up to Jaime if this is going to impact specifically Los Angeles and LA's ports.
Yeah, Jaime, why don't you go first? The answer is it has impacted us in many ways, and we do stay in regular touch with the U.S. Trade Rep, Catherine Tai, and we follow this very closely. But Jaime, you're out on the ground. I'd love to hear from you. I'm sure the viewers would as well.
Sure, it's such an interesting balance, but I think, the bottom line impact is in US exports, particularly for our agricultural growers in the US. Exports are down 36 of the last 40 months and continuing their free fall. It's very, very detrimental to US farmers and growers. And that's the part where we're really trying to figure out how to bolster. That is not only just the retaliatory trade policy, but also on the flip side, this rush to market of bringing what we call evacuating empty containers back to Asia to load more import volumes. So the containers that normally would have made a travel from our West Coast ports inland to be filled with agricultural exports before returning to go back out to Asia where they're usually sold, because of the rush to get empties back because of the high price of bringing imports in, they're not even sending the containers inland. And so that section has been very, very disrupted. So I think that's the most painful part of this that we've seen. As everyone has noted, I think supply chain was the most Googled phrase in the last quarter of last year. Everyone was wondering and turned a keen eye towards our supply chain resiliency and the issues that were going on. A lot of people called it a crisis. We certainly don't necessarily view it as a crisis, but rather a significant increase in import volume that we were dealing with and expanding all of our protocols to be able to handle, at the very least, the dwell times for on-dock containers and rail containers has been cut more than half since last fall. And so we're catching up on all of those aspects of the supply chain and just also trying to create different ways to use technology and foresight into the future to look at those cargo volumes. But, we're seeing a little bit of dip because of the Lunar New Year, and that's always built in and expected. And now with sort of the surges that are happening in Asia too, we've seen a little bit of a hiccup in the import volumes, but still the inbound cargo remains strong.
And so that was very comprehensive, Jaime. Thank you. I'll put my former U.S. ambassador hat on for a moment. The administration announced that they would do a top-to-bottom review of the relationship between the United States and China. The events in Ukraine have certainly captured rightly so, the attention of the administration. But it is still very important that the U.S. government continue to develop the elements of the relationship, the ongoing relationship with China. I think that California is a very important part of this conversation because we are home to about 15% AAPI, ethnically AAPI people, and we have these strong person-to-person exchanges. We are a hub of trade, and we are this incredible open society. And I think that we have the ability to provide some level of being a stabilizing force as we work out our differences. But even during the Trump administration, we were very clear that we felt that the basis for the tariffs that the previous administration put in place were valid. They were based on unfair trading practices by China, by forced partnerships, by other just non-competitive trade practices. And so in my conversations with representatives of China here in California and the consuls general, I'm always encouraging them, take a look at your own practices, because that's going to be really important in being able to find resolution and be able to have a trade relationship in the future that benefits everybody. So I'm very hopeful that, and I do believe there's been something of a de-escalation of tensions, but these challenges still remain, and it's going to require people on both sides of this conversation to be willing to make reforms in order to be able to get back into the kind of open trade that we've seen in the past.
Thank you both. So this next question, also on the supply chains, are you collaborating with any Asian countries on these supply chain issues? And if yes, which ones?
So there's been quite a bit of focus on the Quad, and the federal government is very focused on improving commerce and trade between the United States, Australia, Japan, and who's the fourth one? So in India, sorry,
Yeah.
I was want to say Korea, but in India. And these already were important trade partners with us, but that for me has put a renewed focus, particularly on those relationships. And we really have had a lot of great engagement and activity with Japan. Japan is the #1 source of foreign direct investment into California. At the same time, there's just a lot more opportunity that is before us to be able to increase that foreign direct investment and trade into our state. I mentioned earlier hydrogen. They are the leader in advances in hydrogen power. But it's notable that they have, I think, something like 8,000 hydrogen-powered cars on the roads in Japan, and we have about 10,000 hydrogen-powered cars in California. So a lot of great opportunity there. And again, if the Consul General from Korea is still on, we certainly want to explore ways that we can increase and improve trade with Korea. I think Korea is really having quite a moment right now. Maybe it's because I've been watching Crashing Onto You, this fabulous series. Jaime, have you been watching it as well?
I started it as well.
It's really, really gives you some levity during challenging times. But there is quite a bit of opportunity. I would say that those are our primary areas of focus right now. And again, I mentioned the trip to India and our ongoing work to bolster trade with India as well.
Great, thank you. So this next person notes that New York Times reporting this week covered the potential strike of 22,000 union dock workers employed at 29 ports along the West Coast, primarily in Los Angeles and Long Beach. Is this a concern for the governor's office? And is there anything the governor could do to help mitigate the issue?
Well, I think we should start by noting that our port workers and ILWU members have been working really, really hard under very trying and difficult circumstances over the last 2 years. They were incredibly important in the when we had our critical workers going back, and we talked obviously a lot about our healthcare workers being on the front lines, but people in goods movement were very much on the front lines. Everyone who was relying on their orders from Amazon, there were people behind making sure that you got your packages. And we prioritized making sure that we had PPE and masks to our port workers immediately as they were available. We had testing services prioritized for our port workers, and we had vaccines for them as workers who were on the front lines as early as possible. So every time these contracts come up for renewal, they require a lot of people coming together in order to be able to make sure that that we find common ground. And I'm very hopeful that we're going to be able to do that. I myself don't participate in those conversations, but to all of those who do, I think we are all hoping that they'll be able to come together and find common ground and be able to renew those contracts in a timely way. Certainly in order to be able to avoid any disruption in trade.
Thank you. So this next person asks, how are we investing in prison rehabilitation? Recidivism in California is around 70% and rising, causing more public safety issues than it seems to be solving.
Well, it's a little bit of a different topic, but certainly public safety in general, if you talk about the ecosystem for business, is something that's very important and very much a hot topic. I think that in Los Angeles, you have a mayoral race coming up, and my understanding is public safety and homelessness are the two top issues that people are talking about right now. You know, the way I look at it, as someone who talked about American democracy for 4 years overseas, is you cannot have a system of rule of law if you do not have a system to enforce the rule of law. At the same time, the country was shaken to its core by the killing of George Floyd, and it has launched, rightly so, some very deep soul searching about how we ensure that people of color are not victimized by our system. So these are the conversations that are happening, and I guess what I would say, since we're right here at the end, and I'll just say this personally as your lieutenant governor, is that when President Biden talked about this issue at his State of the Union, he said, we can support our law enforcement and have criminal justice reform. We can do both of these things. And what's important is that we're not fighting with each other in a way that inhibits our ability to make progress on both of these extremely important issues.
Great. Well, thank you so much. That will conclude the audience questions. It was a pleasure joining both of you, and thank you both for your service in all that you do, helping make Los Angeles and California a better place for all of us to live. So, Jaime, I'll turn this back over to you.
Thank you so much, Claire. Thank you very, very much, Lieutenant Governor Kounalakis. Amazing to spend this time with you. Thank you for sharing your vision and all of your work with all of us here today. I also want to thank our viewers, and I believe Kim is going to be coming on as well to wrap up. But thank you so much. Such a pleasure.
Oh, you both were terrific.
Kim, thank you.
That was so informative, and just the conversation, we learned so much just in the exchange between the two of you with all of your expertise. So thank you so much for your time. It was just a terrific program, and we thank you all.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone watching for all that you do for our beautiful state of California.
Thank you.